I welcome Dr. Tangjakhombi Akoijam in this session. And before starting the session, I would like to give a short introduction about her. Dr. Akoijam was born and brought up in Imphal, Manipur, and graduated from Ladikin College, Shillong, and did her master in tourism from Georgia University. And now she is coordinating the Master of Tourism Travel Management program at the university, one of the key programs which takes an important role in skill development in India. So with this brief discussion, since I have already shared details about her profile to all the learners, so with this, I would like to invite Dr. Akoijam to start the session, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kumar, and thank you for inviting me for this session, which is on tourism, which is my subject. I call tourism a happy subject. Why a happy subject? Whenever you visualize tourism or you think about tourism, what is the first thing which comes to mind? It is something related to rest and relaxation. You're going on a holiday, or you are thinking about the sea beaches, where you are relaxing by a pool, or you're going on a safari. So these are all happy pictures, and you are going away from the work pressure. It's basically a break from the routine that we have. And tourism, if you see, it is one of the fastest growing and also one of the most revenue generating industries in the world. And if you look at the statistics, in the year 2012, the total international tourist movement all over the world, it reached the 1 billion mark. That means 1,000 million tourists were traveling at that point of time. If you look back 2018, it has increased to 1,400 million. And the revenue generated, it is staggering. It is to the tune of 1,462 billion US dollar. So you can see it is a very lucrative and a very revenue generating industry. Let's see in terms of India, way back in 1951, we have only about what you call a little less than 17,000 tourists, international tourists coming to India, which by the year 1980, we have recorded about 1 million. That was the first time we reached 1 million tourists coming to India. Then it took us another 15 years for it to double. That means we recorded 2 million international tourist arrivals to India in the year 1995. Then in 2004, we had the Incredible India campaign. And maybe because of that or all the factors involved, we have been increasing. There has been a steady increase in the number of international tourists coming to India. So in 2017, we reached the 10 million mark. In 2018, it reached to 10.58. Now, all this thing, if you look at it, because India is, till 2018, the full figure that we have, we were in the 25th list. And for a country as big as India, with full of resources, a plethora of resources, we're still lagging behind. And it is only just 1%, only just 1% of the total international tourist movement. But the revenue is okay. We have about 28.6 in 2018 in terms of US billion dollars. So it is it is an encouraging picture, I would say. But all these are pre-COVID-19 data, because right now all of us, we are going through very uncertain times. The pandemic all over the globe, it has caused loss of life and livelihood, and many a times what happened is all the economic sector is affected. And tourism, being an industry where you need the flight services, you need the hotels, you need the other attraction, and people, they take part in tourism only when all the other basic necessities are improved. So you can say this pandemic, one of the worst affected sector or industry is also one of them is tourism. And here many livelihood has been, the source of livelihood has been compromised, but human beings are resilient by nature. So this too will also pass. And because human nature is that we cannot live in isolation, neither can we live in a bubble. So as long as when this sort of normalcy is restored, then the tourism will also pick up. So in this context, today's session on ecotourism and livelihood security is very relevant. Why? Because ecotourism is a form of tourism and it is related with how do we secure livelihoods. So first, let me go through this presentation. I will, just one second. So the structure of the presentation, like I said, we will be talking about livelihood security and ecotourism in the context of the overall sustainability concept. And I will give you some cases also. Let's go to the next slide. What do you mean by livelihood? Livelihood, if you think, it is a means of securing the necessity of life. Like it is a means where you get an income or a job and you earn from it, and then you buy the basic necessity out of that. So basically, livelihood, it is a means of securing these necessities of life. And if you look at security, what does security mean? It means the state of being free from danger or from threat. So a feeling of sense of being protected. So simply put, we can say security means safety as well as the measures taken to be saved or protected. So it is not only about being safe, it is also about the measure that you take to be safe and to be secure. So in this way, we can combine and then say livelihood security, it is understood as the access to income and resources to meet the basic needs. Security is very important. Why? Because when you have the assurance that your livelihood is being protected or your means of achieving the basic necessity of life is assured, then you feel that sense of safety and that sense of protectedness. Now, in all these things, poverty is the defining parameter. So what is the defining parameter? Poverty is the defining parameter, and we say when we eradicate poverty, that it will result in attaining the livelihood security. I think somebody was presenting. Should I just go on?
Yes, as you go on, I will.
Okay. Well, there are different, we say eradication of poverty is what will lead to livelihood security. There are various aspects of poverty, but conventional approaches, when we talk about approaches to eradication of poverty, we usually focus only on certain specific aspects, like provision of access to the three basic needs of human being, like food, security, food, clothing, and shelter. And within this three also, we give much emphasis on to the food security part. Now, and this is the reason why many of the humanitarian aids as well as the government schemes, they are focused towards the availability of making sure or the provision of food or the food security. Now, this happened in many of the, if you look at some of the examples in many of the countries, poverty-stricken countries in the 70s and the 1980s, this was the main type of approach, the provision for providing food security. Now, researchers and development practitioners, they found that food insecurity can also occur in a situation when the food is available, but still food insecurity happens. The cause is that the access to this food which is available is not there. So the availability of food is the first criteria which should be there, but apart from that, how do you access it? What are the access points? This is also important. You have got the food token, but if people are not being able to access to it, then that is a problem. So food security, it also happens in situation where the food is available, but the access points are not there. Thus, the provision of food access, it becomes very important, and many a times to safeguard the future, what some people do is they even go hungry. For example, farmers. What farmers do is they have limited amount of food with them, but because they need the seeds for next year harvest, for next year planting, they make sure that even if they go hungry, they keep that stock. They do not touch it. So many a times, food availability again, or the scarcity of food is not the only criteria. So a situation has come where you need to look at an overall holistic view of what poverty means. Poverty is not only about food, poverty is not only about clothing or shelter. Because if we are thinking only on these three aspects, then we can call it as survival. And life is not only about survival, life is about living. Because to survive, we need only those three necessary things, but to survive, to live, and to live a respectable life, we need various other aspects. So other aspects of poverty, it is if we don't have access to potable water, if you don't have access to good educational facilities, job opportunities, all these factors, they are also included in the poverty definition or the aspects of poverty. So different individual again in a society, they have a varying degree of entitlement to resources, or maybe to cope up with a situation when you are in a situation where stress is there. So how do you do that? Some people, they tide easily because of social support. Some, they do not have a network of people and they are alone, so they are not able to cope up the situation. So there are various aspects, like I said, so holistic and a comprehensive, multidimensional approach was required. So this gave rise to the concept of sustainable livelihood and sustainable livelihood framework. So what is sustainable livelihood? Sustainable livelihood, the Department of International Development of the United Kingdom, they define sustainable livelihood as comprising of capabilities, assets, including both the material and the social resources, as for a means of living. And a livelihood is sustainable when it can cope with and recover from stresses and shocks and maintain or enhance its capabilities and assets, both now in the future, but it should not undermine the natural resource base. Not undermining the natural resources. This is where the sustainability part comes, because everything that we have now is finite. So if we keep on digging more into it, the resource base will be depleted. And once the resource base gets depleted, any other future endeavors will be affected. So that sustainability angle is very important. Now, again, when you talk about the ability to cope, like I said, it is different for every group of people, or every group of or a family. Method of coping with stress will be different from another family. So the sustainable livelihood framework, what is this? It is an approach that provides a holistic understanding of the livelihoods of the poor. And it centers on the assets of the poor and how they can increase their ability to withstand the shocks to their livelihood. And 5 assets are identified. And what are those 5? The natural assets, physical assets, human assets, financial assets, and social capital assets. So let us see what each one of them look into. Let's see. Human capital. Human capital, it is, if you give an example, it is about your labor ability, the knowledge that you have, or the good health, because all this collectively will determine how well you are able to work. And then when you talk about social aspects or social assets, then it is the network that you have. If you're a member of a formalized group, then obviously, then that social security or that social asset is there. Then when you talk about natural capital, it is understood, it is the natural resources from which we draw upon. Physical assets, now it refers to the support which is viable for livelihood. And it can include what you call as clean water, you talk of sanitation, we talk of effective shelter. So all these items, again, it comes in physical, this one. Financial capital is very understandable. It is the financial resources that we have in hand. So this basis of change in the paradigm shift of approaches in development from human well-being and with a focus on human being is because of the movement of sustainability, which was being introduced and which was being accepted in what you call all over the world, in different areas of the world. And one of them is the Brundtland Commission report in 1987, which defined sustainable development. Everybody knows this definition. It is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now, this definition, the popularity of this definition, it says that because it is framed in a very simple language, and the connection that they have with the present and the future. Anybody, even from a child to anybody, it is a very, and something which is very easy to remember, something which is very easy to relate to. This was the starting point, and there were other many contributing events in the subsequent years. If you talk about the Agenda 21, you talk about the Rio Convention, there were so many which came into all these things, the Earth Summit. Now, in the context, when we're talking about the livelihood security, now a defining movement was the adoption of the household livelihood security as a framework for relief and development by CARE, which is an international non-governmental organization. In 1994, they have included the household livelihood security. So they define household livelihood security as adequate and sustainable access to income and resources to meet basic needs, which includes adequate access to food, potable water, healthcare facilities, educational opportunities, and all. So basically, the concept of sustainability has also seeped into this area of livelihood security. Can we go to the next slide? Now, when you talk about in the Indian context, we have a former RBI or the Reserve Bank of India Deputy Governor who had suggested a strategy for livelihood security, wherein he addresses three basic components as simultaneously they should be addressed to. What are those? They are jobs, one is skills, and another is a safety net. In terms of job, it is to create as many possible job activities which is outside the agricultural sector. Why he was emphasizing on agricultural sector was India is basically an agrarian economy. More than 70% are involved in this. So we need to move a step ahead, and an important thing is to create jobs in as many fields as possible outside the agricultural sector. And tourism is one area where usually people identify when you talk about job creation. And one of the important steps is the abolition or the throwing away of job security regulations, which feels it imposes an undue cost on the employer, almost like a tax on job, and which deters rather than it encourages job creation. So when you have a job security, then you feel you're not being able to create. Now, jobs may be created, but if you do not have the adequate numbers of people who are skilled in that, then there is pressure again. This skill dimension of livelihood, it must be taken into account that is not a one-time process. It is a lifelong cycle. So we need to put much more emphasis on reskilling and continuing education. And in India, this has been taken up in the last few years or so. Otherwise, once a person is into a job, then for a lifelong, he is into that job. So that skilling, reskilling, or the training, the training development programs. So that is why Human Resource Development Department has become a very important department in any of the, whether it is the private or the government sector now. The third point that he has emphasized is upon a viable safety net financed by a combination of contribution from the workers, the employers, and the government. They are not leaving everything either to the employer or to the government. Because once the worker or the employee does not contribute, then that sense of responsibility is there. It's not there. So you need to have a combined contribution for all three of them, then it becomes much more sustainable. So in India, we have a number of initiatives which aids the livelihood security in India. We have the National Food Security Act, which was there in 2013, then the public distribution system. We have the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, or the midday, and the midday meal scheme is also there. If we look at the National Food Security, which was announced or enacted in 2003, it is a shift from the welfare to the right-based approach. They say that people have the right to have food security. That was basically the main idea of the National Food Security Act. And in India, we also have this public distribution system, which came, which was very one of the important means for the government to combat the COVID-19 situation, because we already have a public distribution system in place. So it was easy for them when people were under lockdown to distribute the basic necessity through the public distribution system, which was already under place. And under the MGN REGA scheme, we have the right to work. So that means they have at least 100 days of wage employment in a financial year to every household whose adult members they can volunteer to work in unskilled manual work. So that facility is given under them. So these are very, and midday meal scheme, we give them to lunches provided to school children. Now it is extended up till 10th class. So this is a scheme which at least give an assurance to people that you are taken care of, that your livelihood security. I won't say these are the ultimate or the most efficient means, but at least some systems is in place. Now the healthcare system has also been, the healthcare facilities has also been included, and so many schemes or initiatives are being done. So these are all in the context of the Indian scenario. So you can see livelihood, it can be made up of a range of on-farm. When we talk about on-farm, it is the agricultural sector that we are referring to, and off-farm activities, which together they provide a variety of strategies for procurement. So the risks of livelihood failures, well, we can say, determines the level of vulnerability. And households, they feel secure of their livelihood when you have access to resources, you have income earning activities, including reserves and assets. And among the income earning activities, ecotourism is one of them. Let us look into it. Why we are bringing ecotourism is because of the sustainability aspect included into it. Now, ecotourism, it is derived from the word eco. And eco, it comes from the Greek word oikos, which means house or habitat. Habitat, it is a natural environment. And the concept of ecotourism, it was coined in 1981 by Hector Ceballos Lascurain. He was a Mexican architect, a conversationalist, an environmentalist, and he was also the founder member of the Mexican Society of Conservation, and was also what you call an advisor to the UNWTO as well as the Ecotourism Society. So he says, ecotourism is that tourism that involves traveling to relatively undisturbed natural areas with the specific object of study, admiring and enjoying the scenery and its wild plants and animals, as well as any existing cultural aspects found in this area. Now, if you look at his definition, it is very simple, but he goes beyond this. He says, ecotourism, if you can go to the next slide, it is written so that the students will be able to see. Ecotourism, it implies a scientific, aesthetic or philosophical approach. Although the ecotourist is not required to be an artist or a professional scientist or a philosopher. And the main point is that the person who practices ecotourism has the opportunity of immersing him or herself in nature in a way that most people cannot enjoy in their routine urban existences. So here he gives it reference to a rural setting. So, and the person or an ecotourist will eventually acquire a consciousness and the knowledge of the natural environment together with the cultural aspects that will convert him into somebody keenly involved in conservation issues. So this was a lengthy definition that he gave, and not very precise. So let us look at some other definitions where everything is packed together. The World Conservation Union, now called as the IUCN, or the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, it defines ecotourism as environmentally responsible travel to natural areas in order to enjoy and appreciate nature, that promote conservation, have a low visitor impact, and provide for beneficially active economic involvement of local people. The International Ecotourism Society, they further compress it and say it is responsible travel. When you use the word responsible, it compiles everything, it covers everything. Responsible travel to natural areas that conserves the environment, sustains the well-living of the local people, and involves interpretation and education. So this is a very concise definition, and which is usually accepted nowadays in ecotourism literature. So based on all this definition, we can point out some characteristic features of ecotourism. One is it involves traveling to natural destination. This is the basis. It is a travel to natural destination. One is the respect of the local culture. That is the culture of the indigenous people there. Usually natural destination or natural environment, they have an indigenous population living there. So we respect the local culture. Then the provision of financial benefits and support for local people and for conservation efforts. So this is again a very important point. The financial benefits coming out of those ecotourism projects, or what you call the initiatives, it should benefit the local people as well as for the conservation of the habitat or the environment. One is, again, another one is the building of the environmental and cultural awareness. Because when the ecotourists come to that destination, then they become more aware of what the people, of the culture, of the ways of life, of how they are living there. So this is very important. And because only from this cultural awareness, then you can have a mutually amicable relationship between the host and the visitors. Empowering local communities through participation or involvement in decision making. This is another very important point in ecotourism. You do not let people, outside people or businessmen, to come and run the show there. The community has to be involved. Why? Because the community is the main draw. The natural setting in which the community lives, that is the main draw for ecotourism to happen. So obviously you need to empower the local community so that they are also part of the decision-making process. The educational component for both the traveler as well as the local community. This is another characteristics. Why the educational component? Because ecotourism, when you talk about ecotourism, you talk about a special form of, or special type of tourist. The group of ecotourists is different from the general tourist. The profile of the ecotourist is different from the general tourist. As a general tourist, we go for leisure trips. We go to ecotourism destination also, no doubt about it. But when you are involved or you indulge in ecotourism activity, then that educational component, you learn something out of it, and you are also a part. Maybe many a times what the ecotourists do is they also volunteer for this ecotourism destination conservation efforts. So this is that contribution both from the tourists themselves is also very important. And the whole overall concept of what you call ecotourism, it is to minimize the negative impact as reasonably as possible. The word reasonably as possible is there because whatever type of activity, however sustainable we strive to be, some form of negative impact will always be there. How do you minimize that? So as reasonably as possible, as reasonably as minimum that you can. This is the essence of ecotourism. So you can say ecotourism, it is a combination of nature-based tourism. We define nature-based tourism as when you go to a natural setting and you enjoy the environment there. And then another is the conservation supporting tourism. Why do we call as conservation supporting tourism? Because there are certain forms of tourism which conserve or which are held bent on saying this assets needs to be conserved. So that form of tourism, ecotourism, is also part of that. Then sustainably managed tourism. We have been talking about sustainability for so long. So this is also one area which is understandable, the sustainability managed tourism. And all this indicate that the root of ecotourism is again in sustainable tourism practices. It is not just tourism going for leisure activity, it is a sustainable form. And this sustainable concept in tourism, we have the Brundtland report definition we have seen before, World Commission on Environment and Development. So this sustainability issues, first it originated, or it originally referred to the natural environment, but now it has extended to the socio-economic and the cultural sphere as well. And this in sustainability development literature, or in sustainable development practices, these are the three dimensions or the pillars. What are those? The economic sustainability, the cultural sustainability, and the environmental sustainability. I would say ethical aspect should also be included as one of these pillars. So there should be 4 pillars in there, not only out of these 3, ethical, because, and especially in a form of tourism like ecotourism, when you are not ethical, when the promoters or the developers of ecotourism initiatives, they're not ethical, then the problem arises. Ethics is not only limited to ecotourism or to any other, it is related with every aspect of life. So it is high time from these 3 pillars of sustainability that a 4th pillar of sustainability also needs to be addressed or included, which would be the ethical sustainability. Economic sustainability, we know it is, again, you address the cost effectiveness of all the economic activity. Social sustainability, respecting human rights and equal opportunity for all in the society, and the emphasis is on local community. Maintaining and strengthening the life support system, recognizing and respecting different cultures, and avoiding any form of exploitation. This is what social sustainability in the context of ecotourism, I would say. That environmental sustainability, conserving and managing the resources, especially those that are not renewable, are precious in terms of life support. So apart from the dynamic growth of as a major contributor to economy, tourism, because it has got certain unique features, it can make a sizable contribution to make sustainable development. Because in tourism is one sector where if you want to buy the product, you have to go there, and then you have to simultaneously buy it and simultaneously consume that. For example, if you're buying a tour package, you're going to the Andamans, you're buying a tour package. So you have paid for it, everything is settled. But for you to enjoy that, or for you to make sure that the tour package, you have to reach Andaman and enjoy it. If you go to a physical shop and then you buy a television set, you give them the money, you bring it home, it is yours. You need not go. But for you to enjoy tourism, you have to be present at the destination itself. So this is a peculiar or a unique feature of tourism. There are others. One is interaction is there between the visitors, the host community, and the local environment. Because you are going there and you are interacting, obviously the interaction will be there. Then because when you are interacting and you are physically present there, obviously you become aware of the environmental issues or other issues which are cropping up in that situation. And one thing is, in tourism depends upon the natural environment or the resources, because those are the attractions and those are the basis on which tourism is built upon. And so you know that you are dependent on that. If the providers or the developers, the promoters of tourism know that you are sitting on the base, and if you erode it, that it will affect you, then obviously that sustainability part automatically comes. So that dependency, the knowledge of that I am dependent, my business is dependent, my livelihood is dependent on the resource base that I have, that dependency awareness is very important. So, and one thing is, in tourism because tourist goes to that destination, there is a very close and direct relationship, and it creates a very sensitive situation. Why a sensitive situation is, it can be both very damaging as well as it can be very positive. Damaging and positive, or both sides of the coin is there. So it can be very damaging or it can be positive. Damaging in the sense, if you extract more of the resources and you don't take care of it, or you don't conserve it, then you are depleting your own base. And positive is when the income that you get from tourism, it is diverted back or given back to conservation efforts, then it is a positive side. So you have both sides of it. So how do you do that? You have to do it in such a way that you need to plan the proceedings, everything from the beginning. And many people, we always confuse ecotourism and sustainable tourism, and they are used synonymously, which is wrong. Which is, I wouldn't say wrong, it is inappropriate. Why? Because sustainable tourism is not a form of tourism. Ecotourism is a form of tourism, but sustainable tourism is not a form of tourism. The concept of sustainability is that all forms of tourism should strive to be more sustainable. So there is no thing as sustainable tourism. Why? Because all forms of tourism, there are two things I would like to give you a brief, bit into it. We have types and forms. Types of tourism, we have domestic tourism, we have international tourism. And in international tourism, people who are coming to India from outside, the foreigners who are coming to India, they are called as the inbound tourists. If I go out from here to some other country, say Thailand, I am an outbound tourist. Whereas in the forms of tourism, these are the different forms. We have ecotourism, we have leisure tourism, we have cultural tourism, historical tourism, and people, we always think of it as types and forms of tourism. Again, these two words are used synonymously, but types is more of a very broader nature, like in domestic tourism. Domestic tourism is tourism which is happening within the boundary of a country. It is the domestic tourism. Then international tourism is which involves cross-border travel. When you are crossing an international border, then that is international tourism. So sustainable tourism, like I said, it is not a form of tourism, but it is a concept, or it is a directive for all tourism which is strive to be sustainable. Now, ecotourism, with all the characteristics that we have seen of conservation, of sustainability, of emphasis to the local people, because it embraced the principle of sustainability, we say ecotourism has got a much higher chances of reaching the sustainability point. But other forms of tourism can also be part of this sustainable effort. The only thing is you need a little bit of detailed planning before you launch a product. So ecotourism is a niche product. We have different type forms of tourism. Out of that, ecotourism is one of them. Now, when you talk about tourism, like I said, you need to take into account the planning, the development, and the operation of the tourism. And the chances, like I said, again, it is very high of achieving sustainable tourism. Just because it is high, it does not mean that we lack or we ignore the planning part. The planning has to be done. So, even if the chances of achieving sustainability are very high, we need to plan ecotourism projects and ecotourism initiatives. Because if you do not plan this thing, the very base upon which then lots of people, there are chances that people will come in great numbers. And the one of the characteristic of ecotourism is to limit. It is more of not of a high volume, or in terms of tourist arrivals, it is more of lesser number of people, but the quality that they bring into the operational part, it should be very high. The quality should be there. It is not the quantity which we go by when we go in ecotourism. So there will be unchecked flow of tourists if we do not plan it. So eventually this will disturb and destroy the very essence of this form of tourism, that is ecotourism that we are discussing. So now let us see what does ecotourism and livelihood, how we did. And ecotourism, like we said, it is based on natural environment and ideally on the community involvement. So therefore, it will contribute to the growth and development of a country through the utilization of the abundances of natural resources while uplifting the communities. And this is when you are ensuring that the opportunities for them to engage in alternate livelihood strategies. For example, if a natural destination community, they have agriculture as their source of income or the source of livelihood. So ecotourism should be seen as not as a substitute, but it should be more of an additional or maybe a slightly alternate livelihood strategy. So they can get the combination of both of them. So communities will have access to different types of capital, such as financial capital from ecotourism related activities and natural capital from the protected area. They will also have income or capital from the traditional occupation or the traditional livelihood method that they were using it. So they should not abandon whatever they were practicing, and this will insulate them from shocks and allow the sustenance of their livelihood. So it is an enrichment for them, and this is incongruent with the sustainability livelihood framework that we have discussed before. Let us look at a few of the ecotourism livelihood models. Ecotourism projects, if you look at it, is there are multitudes of ecotourism projects in India and abroad. It is a very fashionable type of word, but whether they are all following the true ecotourism principle, it is debatable. If you go to a natural setting and people say it is, they use the word ecotourism just to make attract more visitors. Now, in the process, they are not following the ecotourism concept. So I have taken 4 case studies because here we need to see what is the involvement of the community. There are 5 ways in which communities are involved in a tourism or ecotourism setting. One is tokenism. Tokenism is when the promoters of ecotourism, they give employment to the community, a few members of the community. For example, they hire them as their drivers or as a tour guides, just as a token. So this is tokenism, a minimal amount of community involvement. Another is informing. In informing, what happens is the communities are informed about the ecotourism development being planned, and they are also given some employment, right? So this is informing. Now, in this, what happens is because the community has been informed, so at least they have a space wherein they can raise their insecurities or whether they can bring their issues. They are given a space, but they are not a part of the formal decision-making process. Then another is consulting. In consulting, what happens is the community are consulted, and but here again, the aspiration of the community, it may be met or it may not be. They may take into consideration or they may not take into consideration. They are consulted, but they are consulted, and they are also like I said, they have a platform to raise the issue, but they're not part of the decision-making process. One is collaborating. In collaboration, what happens is the promoters or the developers of ecotourism, they treat the community as equal partners. So it is a 50-50 or a PPP model, we call it. So the community are also there, the developers are also the developers. They may be a private body or they may be the government. Communities are different and the government is different in this context. So it is a PPP model. So in this, the collaboration is there. So the community are also part of the decision-making process, and they can generalize the benefit. They decide where do they generalize the benefit. Then another and the best form is the ownership. Here, the community takes direct control, or the community is the one who is initiating the project itself. So these are different cases where community involvement is there. I have just selected 4 of them. Let us see what are those. Tenmala in Kerala, why I have picked this, it is more of on this not tokenism, but more of the informing type of community involvement. It is not pura owned by the community. But why I have taken this, because it is India's first planned ecotourism destination. So if you talk about ecotourism in India, Tenmala Ecotourism Project always comes into mind because it is the first planned ecotourism destination in the country. So in Tenmala, what does it mean? It means honey hill in Malayalam. Tenmala means honey hill. And Tenmala is located in the Kollam district of in the Western Ghats. And the Kerala government in 1998, they have established the Tenmala Ecotourism Society. So this Ecotourism Society, in consultation or in collaboration with the tourism department, the forest department, and the irrigation department, they visualize the Tenmala Ecotourism project. So in this project, more than 70% of the staffs of this project, they are from the local community. And lots of benefits are given to the self-help groups. And there was provision for training and camps to enhance the hard and soft skills of the people associated with the project. And there was some form of local community representation also. But overall, the people of the community, the local community people, they are not directly involved in the decision making. So when researchers have gone there and then they have done a lot of satisfaction level study among the community, that sense of what you call it is not exactly, they say they have benefited a lot from this project, no doubt about it. They were all satisfied in that. But the type of benefits that is given to them, it is at a very marginal level. So now, after so many years, because Tenmala is also one, it has received many awards, and it is often seen as a model for ecotourism development. But yet, the people are, there are some issues which needs to be addressed. So this is one case. Another is the Mountain Shepherd Initiative, which is in the Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve. And what happens here is, it arises out of what you call the people claiming for the rights, the forest rights. So it was an initiative, the Mountain Shepherd Initiative. It was formalized in 2006. And what happens is, in May 2001, the government, with the support of the Ministry of Environment and Forest, they have approached the Indian Mountaineering Foundation to look into the feasibility of reopening this park. First, it was opened to the visitors, then because of the lots of negative environmental impact, they have closed it down. So they were, in 2001, they were thinking of reopening it, but with limited access or limited visitation. And they've had approached the Indian Mountaineering Foundation for that. So when this initiative came from the government, what happens is the community, the local community, one is the Bhutia community, they got together and then they formed the Nanda Devi campaign in a village called as Lata. And another is the members or the villagers of the Niti Valley, they have also got together and then they have came up with a document, a progressive biodiversity and conservation document, which outlined what will be their role in when this ecotourism thing comes into the picture. So it was almost like the setting was there, the initiative was given by the government, and the community jumped into it. The community are proactive members. So the government finally agreed to it, and this initiative was formed, and it is completely owned, completely operated by the community themselves. And the benefits are immense. The economic benefits are there. because the benefit, the income which is coming from that initiative, it is coming to them. And because it is their community, they know what is to be conserved, they know what up to the limit where they can go. So this is an initiative which is community based, community owned, and it has lots of, like I said, benefits. There were local out migration was reduced because the project itself was thriving. So the local people, they need not go to the city and work there. So they are contained within there, and they have got the job opportunities. And the self-help groups, they make the souvenirs, so those can be sold. And then the homestays, some group of families, they have started the homestays, and everything is collected in a common fund, and then the distribution happens. And the distribution is also such that every part of the community is benefited. One is the Sundarban, the case, the third case is the Sundarban jungle camp. It is the Sundarban mangrove forest, which has even got the UNESCO World Tourism tag, and which really helped it. And because it is an ecologically fragile area, there were lots of during 2000 to the year 2000, there were lots of poaching. So the forest officer, he has contacted a help tourism group, a destination promoter group called as Help Tourism. So this is a community and private sector model where the government was the facilitator, but usually the technical point and the technical aspect is input is given by this Help Tourism group, and this one is managed. The project is managed by the community itself. So the involvement of the community members, lots of when it was being initiated, they have identified more than 3,000 man-hour and more than 2,000 villagers. They were involved in the construction or in developing the infrastructure, and they have very specific what you call percentages of benefit distribution. 7% they have kept it for health services, health facilities, and another 5% for the garment bank. Then they have another 5% for research and development. So all in all, out of all the total income which is coming to that area, 70% were retained in the community. In any tourism enterprise or in any tourism initiative, leakages means the money is there, but it does not stay within that community. It goes away from the destination. That is what we call as leakages. But in this case, only more than 70% they are retained, so it is beneficial to the community. The local employment are given active role of the community in decision making process. So this is, like I said, a combination of the private sector as well as the community. And here the ethical issue comes. The private sector involvement, which they have chosen, Help Tourism, have got a high standard of ethical operation. That's why it was successful. Let's go to the fourth case. I think we are also going a little ahead of beyond this one. This I have taken Indonesia's Wairebo Island. It's in the Flores Island. The best part about this case is that originally the people were dependent on agriculture and coffee plantation. So it is at a very high level, sea level. And if you have to go to this island from the nearest seaport, it is 7 hours of drive plus 3 hours of trekking. Only then are you going to reach this place. So the people were having a lot of hardship there. They have to come down the mountains, even if they have the coffee plantation, they pluck it, they process it, they bring it down. So very hard life for the people. So one of them, his name was Martin. He has approached an NGO in Indonesia and Indigo, and told them that their village, their tribe has got a very unique form of housing, and they have just got two of that at that time, and it was in a very sad condition, a very depleted condition. So he approached them, and then he said, if you can help us build 5 more of that, and then we restructure those two, refurnish those two, and then people can come here because it is very unique. So there was a lot of consultations when he approached them. There were lots of consultation, and then finally an architect was deputed, and they made those 5 conical. If you look at the background of the picture, it is only 7 of those exist in this village, and it is a village of 1,200 people. 1,200 people live in those village, and 7 conical houses. And 7 conical houses, out of those, 2 are reserved for the tourists, and 5 the people are living there. 5, not all of them are living there. 6 to 8 families are living, and it is a 5-tiered or a 5-story building structure. So 6 to 8 families live, and the remaining, which are not accommodated inside that house, they live in accommodation facility, which are and which is being borne by the income which comes from the ecotourism activity. And even if the place is in a very remote area, you have to say, go, like I said, 7 hours of drive and 3 hours again of trekking, but still people come there. Because now tourists have become experimental. We do not, there are a whole group of people, whole group of tourists who want to experience new things. And it is not just related to going to a famous destination like seeing the Eiffel Tower and coming back. So a group of niche tourists are there, and they take up this type of ecotourism initiative. And the speciality, it is a 5-story tall cone-shaped drum houses made up of thatched palm, and each story has got different functions. The 5th one is for the spirit, where they give the offerings. The bottom is where the people reside, 6 to 7 families with partitions of curtains. And then in the middle is the hut, where everybody comes there. And the concern is that as the popularity of the destination grows, whether the community tradition and way of life could be sacrificed in the process. This was the main concern, which were there in the mind of the developers as well as the community members. But they decided to go for a slow tourism growth model. They are not looking for numbers. But in spite of that, more than 50 visitors come. It is said more than 50 visitors come every day there, and about 6,000 tourists in a year. Because the people say, we never wanted tourism to take the place of agriculture. They have to go hand in hand. And they realize that if business is too booming, it will backfire for the culture. This is sustainability as its best definition. The people have realized themselves. This is what sustainability. If you have to look into a definition, a practical definition of sustainability by looking at a case and then you're looking into it, I would say this is the perfect definition of sustainability. So these are some of the cases, and if you look up or read any of the books and the cases there, you have multitudes of ecotourism initiatives, but not all with the tagline ecotourism, not all of them are ecotourism initiatives. That name has been misused, and this is a sorry state that we have here. But for ecotourism to thrive, that basic principle, ethical thing should be there. So with this, I end my presentation, and we can go in for if there's any questions or any thought that you would like to share, that would be most welcome.